Hello, this is Dr. Garrett Castleberry again, and I'm going to take a quick minute to talk about one of the primary methods we will use in our media culture and social influence class. It's a method that speaks across a couple of our texts. Of course, they're texts by the same author. The first of which is Media and Society from Arthur Asa Berger. And as I've mentioned previously, the primary model that Berger uses is one of his origination that's a bit of an offshoot. It borrows from some other theorizations about not only communication, but ways we can assess media through a kind of easy to follow lens or tool. All right, and so the title again is Berger's Focal Points Model, and it simply asks us, as I hold up the page number 1 of the book, it simply asks or sets up a situation in which we can assess any media or piece of media if we follow these simple steps in how we think about the media and thus analyze it for its meaning and values that it serves in our lives. And so there are 5 easy to remember components. In fact, Berger organizes them mostly starting with the same letter by intent, and that's to help us keep track of these nonlinear ways of analyzing media content. All right, and so the first thing we want to recognize is anytime we are analyzing, we need a subject, and so that subject we can identify as an artwork. Okay, and so artwork is another term for the text. And if you are familiar with a lot of my work, I often refer to items under analysis as texts or as artifacts, which would have made just as easy, if not even more meaningful term if Berger so choose, but he went with artwork. So if any artwork or text is going to be under evaluation, then the next thing we might want to know is who is the artist, another A word, okay? And so the artist can also be understood as the author, all right? The author or the creator of the text. And if we were getting into sort of that mode of rhetorical criticism or approaching it from means of how a text or artifact is persuasive, we could identify that author or creator as sometimes what we call the rhetor, all right? And so we've got the artwork and the author. The next thing, we're going to pivot away from our A words to an M word. And so this term is medium, all right? And the medium is sort of the carrier of the message, or to use his term, no, that is his term, the medium, right? The carrier of the message. And so we're going to talk a lot about mediums over the long haul of this degree program, and you're going to get familiar with that. But we have different types of mediums that carry media messages, and we tend to think of those along the lines of elements like television or radio or perhaps film, right? You think about going to the movies versus staying at home, listening to the radio in your car, and so on. We have a tendency to kind of isolate where mediums take place, although one of the newer mediums we've become accustomed to tends to bring these all together, and that medium would be the internet, right? Which we assume most of you are watching on right now. Okay, and so we have our artist, and we have our artifact or artwork, and these things produced together occur on a medium. And so the fourth item we want to recognize that is important to consider is the audience. Of course, right? If we just referenced that you yourselves are partaking in a video on a medium, primarily the internet, well, you serve in that capacity. And I think that's something we not only identify with ourselves as audience members, but it's now something very, very in conversation with with the impact that media messages have, right? So traditional models of communication, maybe they were less concerned with audiences because mass media or mass communication was so much more powerful as a one-to-many form of communication. But items like the internet, like fan engagement, audience reception, has it leveled the playing field to a certain extent, all right? At least to the point where media producers can no longer ignore the audiences. And so that's why that becomes such an important factor. And so we have the artwork, we have the artist, something we want to consider, the medium with which that communication is displayed. We have the audience, and finally, the fifth of Berger's focal points is America. Okay, and so America, what a great word, right? Easy to remember for most of our viewers here, right? Our audience participants, and what he means by America. Berger's referring to the society in which a text is produced. And so when we think about America as the society, a couple of things come to mind. First of all, what are we really talking about? We're talking about a term I like to use, the cultural context, all right? And so nothing is ever created in a vacuum. Everything exists in conversation with something else. And so you can think about that in terms of when you apply that final A, that America aspect of analysis, you're really asking yourself or thinking about, why did that text come about when it did? Or why was it popular when it was? And so the more we think about it, it's less to do with actually always being, something about America, but rather the things in culture, in society, that create a space for one message to have more resonance or meaning or popularity or persuasion than others. All right, and so the argument Berger contends is that with these 5 elements, you will be able to better understand media and thus gain greater insights into the many roles it can and often does play in our lives. So that's a little bit of food for thought for you. Berger's focal points, reflect on those. We'll probably be exploring them in discussion, and we will definitely be plugging those in at some point in one of our analysis assignments to come. All right, thank you.